Hi everyone, I'm Rob Chisholm.
And I'm Jo Chisholm.
And together we're going to take you through a presentation which is aimed at helping you know the things that we feel you would benefit from knowing before you even start embarking on a kitchen project. In other words, how you get from where you are now with an existing kitchen perhaps, or some plans for a future kitchen, through the painful stage of the building works, all the way through to your final gorgeous kitchen that you will be using and enjoying hopefully for many years to come.
So we split it into two parts. The first part concerns budgeting and design, which I'll do, and then I'll hand over to Rob, who'll take you through project management. So budgeting design, one of the first questions we get asked is how much is everything going to cost? So here are some things that you need to consider. So first off is designs. If they're free, you're probably paying for them somewhere along the line. Good design costs money. The cabinetry, what it's made of, are you after a chipboard carcass or a solid wood carcass or something in between like MDF? Worktops could be quartz, granite or porcelain, and there are pros and cons of each material. Appliances, think about what you'd like. Do you want to spend money on these? Is this important to you? And then other things, fitting, handles, ancillaries, lighting, all add up to the total cost of your kitchen.
Can I do this bit?
Yep.
I'll do this bit. So people often say, where should we spend our money and where should we save it? Absolutely, where to spend money is on the cabinetry, because that's going to be one of the hardest things to replace. And make sure that it's optimized for you. So for example, drawers are so much more usable and helpful than cupboards. They're more expensive, but people will really appreciate those when they're in. Built-in appliances, definitely, it's partly because there's additional cost if you want to replace those in future, but there's absolutely no need for top of the range with features that you'll never use. And one of the things we really recommend is spending money on professional kitchen fitting, because a cheap kitchen that's well fitted will last longer and look better, and likewise a very expensive kitchen that's poorly fitted will look, quite frankly, awful and a lot cheaper.
Places you can save, you don't need to go for brand name quartz like Silestone or Caesarstone. There are other manufacturers out there that produce good quality quartz.
But I'd watch out, because some of those cheaper ones will stain more easily, and they might also fade with UV light.
Yeah, I wouldn't go too cheap. Freestanding appliances that you can swap out in future, or you might have existing ones that you can use in your new kitchen. You don't have to spend £300 a handle. You could spend £30 or £3, and those are something that can be changed over time as well. And also utility rooms. If you've got other rooms like utility rooms, boot rooms, you don't have to spend blow the budget on those. You could go for a slightly more affordable option like a chipboard carcass in there.
Okay, and then the other thing that you need to budget for are any building or enabling works that you'll need to do before the kitchen goes in. You can see a list here. It's removing the old kitchen, it's new flooring, structural work, new doors and windows, architraves, that sort of thing. You might need to make good with some plastering, painting and decorating, and then there'll be a lot of rubbish that's created, and someone will need to pay for that to be removed. So just make sure you account for all of those.
The most important thing is to start the kitchen conversation early, for a number of reasons. Sometimes the lead times for ordering cabinetry can be 8 to 12 weeks, but it also takes the pressure off making decisions later in the build, especially if it's part of a big build. You need to think about, you don't want to be thinking about the kitchen at the last minute when you're already being bombarded with lots of other decisions. In addition, your builder's going to need to know things about your kitchen way before the kitchen's actually fitted. So he'll need to know where the electrics and the plumbing are going. And the other thing is that if you get involved early with the kitchen design, it can help drive the architecture. Because architects are not kitchen designers. They are great at what they do, but they don't know the intricacies of kitchen design. And a kitchen designer could help you to maybe transform the space or make little tweaks which will make the kitchen much better, a better layout, better designed in the future.
Okay, and we've got a couple of examples here. The first one is where a client came to us nice and early in the process, and the second one was where we got involved a bit too late, and you can see the impact that that had on their project.
So this was a project that we got involved in nice and early. You can see this is the original architecture that we were presented with. You've got the kitchen on one side, the living room on the other side, and then you've got this sort of hallway in the middle that the architecture designed, and you went from one to the other through this hallway, which would have resulted in a kitchen like this, which is quite small. The island is pretty tiny, and then you don't really use this space here. So we looked at it and went, well, what happens if we actually just square off that room and get rid of that little corridor hallway and open up the kitchen? And then this is the resulting design. So you get a much bigger island, everything flows nicely, and we had some sliding doors in between the two rooms so they could still separate them if they wanted to, but it just gave you a much better, well thought out kitchen.
Okay, here's a second example of a kitchen that we got involved with a bit later in the process. What you can see here in red is a skylight or roof lantern above the island, and this had already been built well before we got involved in designing the kitchen. And the blue dotted line shows you the outline of the island worktop. And what that's meant, as you can see here, the red is, as you can see, the position of the skylight, and the blue line's the island, and therefore the island, which could have been centered nicely underneath the skylight, the layout just didn't work having it under there, and so it was actually moved off to the right on the screen and doesn't line up. It's a really simple thing, and it's not the end of the world, but if we got involved a bit earlier, that skylight could have been moved, or roof lantern could have been moved, and I think there would have been a better end result.
So talking about layouts, there are certain distances that we recommend which just help you to get the space right and make sure there's enough circulation room around things like your island. So generally we allow 1,000 to 1,200 mil in between an island and a main run. If there's bar stools involved, we need to add a little bit more to account for chairs being pulled in and out. Things like taps being centered to windows and the range being centered on the wall is also really important just for visual aesthetics. And we like to leave about 650 for unit runs that are up against the wall, so sink runs or hob runs, just to allow enough room for the services to run behind.
Gives you a nice deep worktop as well, extra worktop space. This is definitely one for you.
Colours and finishes, yes. There is so much choice out there. People get very overwhelmed with choosing colours and finishes, but basically if you click to the next slide, just be wary of trends. So your kitchen should last you 20 plus years, and we would recommend that you go with something that you love, not just something that's trendy like pink, for example. There are things that you can change quite quickly. So if in a few years' time you decide that you don't like the blue anymore that was trendy, so at the top we've got a blue kitchen that we did, and actually a few years later, 9 years later, she decided to repaint it green and change the handles from chrome to antique brass. So you can see that sort of thing is quite easy to change. So you can, that's the beauty of solid wood kitchens, you can change the colours in time. Handles quite easy to change. Soft furnishings not so easy. Worktops, sinks, flooring. So those things you really want to think carefully about and get them right. It's easy to go with neutrals and then add accents like your cushions, bar stools, blinds, etc. And you can mix and match metals. We often get people asking if they could have a stainless steel tap, stainless steel fridge, but still have antique brass hinges and handles, and you absolutely can do that.
Okay, this next one's really, really important. We've gone straight onto it, and that's called getting the lighting right. Jay's going to talk a bit about this, but here's an example of the impact that lighting can have in a space. And there are some very simple principles to go with.
Yeah, so you need to consider three main types of lighting. So task lighting, which is where you're going to be working, so where you're going to be chopping, prepping, washing up, things like that. Mood lighting, so if you're going to be having a dinner party, you don't want to be having glaring lights on. And then accent lighting, so highlighting things like artwork or beautiful bit of joinery, things like that, you should also think about lighting. And the main rule of lighting is to light where you need it. Don't just light empty space, and don't just go for grids of lighting, spotlights in your ceiling, because that just doesn't do anybody any favours. And you particularly want to look at shadows, so that if you're standing at the sink, you don't want the light spotlight behind you, because it's just going to cast a shadow when you're washing up. And similarly, other spaces when you're working, you need to just think about putting the light above you, not behind you. Other things to think about are the temperature of the light. Do you want a warm white or a cool white? And to make sure that there's continuity across the space. And then how you'll control the light as well, and where things are switched on and off, or do you want to go for a smart lighting system?
Okay. Okay, we're now moving into the project management bit, and we've got a couple of tips here, which are really worth listening to. So the first thing is about having a realistic understanding of timescales, and whether you're an experienced house doer-upper or if it's your first project, it's really important that you understand these. I mean, anyone who's watched Grand Designs knows that projects get delayed, and just it's on TV and it happens in reality. And the reality is that maybe 5% of the projects that we're involved with, the site is ready on time. The rest are either delayed or, frankly, would have benefited from a bit more time to get them finished properly. It's really, really important that you have honest and realistic conversations with your builder. The reality is that your builder is probably not going to want to give you bad news about delays. And again, if you're like many people, you won't want to hear bad news about delays. And therefore, it's really important to make sure that communication happens and that you're having realistic, honest, and frank conversations about how the project's going and whether or not you're actually going to be on track. It's quite normal for stuff to slip. We joke about this, don't we, about not planning a major family event such as Christmas right at the end of your project. Architects say it, builders say it, we say it. It puts everybody under pressure. There's always next Christmas or Easter to aim for. It really doesn't do you or anybody on the project any favours to be under that much pressure. And then the last piece of advice on this is we would always advise people to, if you are going to delay it, delay the fit sooner rather than later, because no kitchen company has got a bottom drawer full of great kitchen fitters able to drop everything and come to your project just because it's been slipped by a couple of weeks. Now, again, most companies, we're booked up for 3 or 4 months sometimes, and therefore, if you leave it to the last minute to delay the fit of your kitchen, you could be delaying it not by a week or two, but by a couple of months potentially. Some of the key events you need to watch for, making sure you've got your windows in, they're often delayed. The screed, that's really, really important, depending upon the type of screed, because it can take up to 2 months for a screed to dry. You can't tile on top of a damp screed. We'd always suggest using a moisture meter to check how dry it is. The best tiler we know would say he would never tile onto anything that's got more than 10% moisture in it.
And certainly wood flooring, that's even worse.
Yeah, we've seen that before where it was rushed, the screed wasn't dry, the wood floor went on, and funnily enough, wood warped, buckled, and the floor had to be relaid, causing a massive impact on the project. Make sure that you're keeping an eye on first fix services. Again, you'll need to have your kitchen design locked down well before the first fix services go in, so that the kitchen company can supply your people with detailed mechanical and electrical drawings. And plastering. Plastering involves an awful lot of water and creates a lot of humidity in the room and can take a long time to dry. What you don't want is anything going into a wet room. Which takes us on to our final point, and that's about the importance of having your space, whether it's for the kitchen, your utility, your boot room, whatever it is, having it absolutely ready for fitting. Here's an example of a kitchen space that is definitely not ready for fitting. There are no windows in, there's bare plaster on the wall that's drying in some places. The floor is half tiled, it's not grouted. First fix electrics don't seem to have been pulled through. It's just not ready, and that's what you need to avoid. This, on the other hand, is a space that is absolutely ready, and your kitchen company and fitter will absolutely love you if you present them with something like this when they rock up on day one to fit the kitchen. You've got the floor down, the walls are decorated, all the first fix electrics and plumbing are in, nicely coiled and ready to go. So that's, I think, all on that one. Right, we're at the end. Hopefully you found that helpful. It's a bit of a run through of 7 of the key sort of themes that we've picked up over the years. If you've got any questions, do drop us a line. You've got a QR code there on the screen and our website. You can get in touch that way. Hopefully you found it helpful, and good luck with your project.